There were concerns this may not happen. Danny Kanell joins us, CBS Sports. Before we even went on to tape this, he was like, "Are we good?" And I said, "I don't know yet. We'll see. We'll see how this goes. I don't know. How did it get so bad between us this year? This felt like it started getting personal."
It reminded me a lot when we yelled at each other in studio at ESPN Radio when you were with Van Pelt and I do my weekly guest segment and come in there and start yelling about the SEC and you'd get all mad and like it was ugly. And I'd walk out of there and be like, I don't know if he's ever going to talk to me again. Like it got that one. And there's been a couple, social media exchanges that have been felt like hostility is out there. So I don't know. It's Christmas season though, so hopefully we can put it behind us. But have you recovered though? Are you okay? Because I know you wanted 6 teams in from the SEC. Like, is it okay that we only have 3? Is it okay?
I'm okay with that. And I do remember that one specific hit because we didn't really, I'd like to think we didn't really fight that much when we did the show together, which I think is a challenging thing for people when you're in a room all the time. And like, I took pride in the fact that like, I think Van Pelt and I only got into like 4 fights in 6 years, but that guest spot you did that day, I do remember it like it was yesterday, because I think at one point, like Scott and I we'd had it with you from whatever you were doing that weekend. And we were just going through all of the tweets. And then I think you kind of broke because fighting with you, like if somebody wants to get into an argument with you, it's not going to happen. I actually respect that you have that power in you where you're just like, I'm not going to engage. Like I've even talked to your wife about it. She's like, it sucks to argue with him because he just goes, all right, whatever. But you had it with us, which is fine because we were giving it to you. And you yelled, "Why do you follow me then?" And I was kind of like, well, we do because I think we're friends and we all work together. But yeah, right. You're right. Like when Bama's down 3-0 and you do the eye emoji 7 minutes into a football game, that was the one Van Pelt was like, "Oh, and the eye emoji, ooh, ooh." Like we were just.
I brought back the eye emoji this year too. I wanted to tag you on that one because when Indiana was playing Ohio State, I've learned, though, that I just leave it vague enough because it was early. Indiana moved the ball right down the field. And I was like,
they converted 3. They had 3 third downs. They converted. It was an incredibly impressive drive, but it's also a very Ohio State thing to do where they're like, okay, we're going to take the first quarter off all season long. Yeah. All right. So let's get into it then. Fuck it. I'm okay with the SEC not having 6 teams in. I doubt you were listening to what I was doing at the end, but I had kind of come to the realization with Bama where I'm like, you know what? I'm not going to argue this team being in. There's a lot about them that I look at the collective 12 games and go, this is not the default, like, hey, you wouldn't want to play them. Because I know you used to hate that because it was kind of unfair at times when we had the 4-team system where the default was, yeah, okay, but nobody wants to play Alabama. And you're like, okay, but fine. There were years where I were arguing for them and years I was arguing against it. But this year, I just kind of was like, look, I've probably been as critical of Milroe as anybody for the last couple of years. I felt like they got gashed 4 different times. And even though the head-to-head with South Carolina, I think you could have in the committee, if you were in the room, you could talk about the South Carolina LSU loss and go, they got absolutely hosed. We have something real to point to. The head-to-head with Ole Miss bothered me. But look, this committee liked records more than they cared about how the records were achieved. And maybe you like that better than me. But I think the problem that I would have with you is that you would just say, no matter what, like, let's just argue against the SEC teams, even if their schedule experience was different than, say, in Indiana or even in SMU. Like, to look at the conference championship games, which I understand and almost admire that they were like, we don't want to penalize a losing team in a conference championship game for playing the extra game. And I like that. But then when the rankings come out and you're like, you can't put Clemson ahead of SMU when they just played each other because you were so married to this idea that the conference championship game isn't going to impact your rankings whatsoever. So look, it's a committee of people. We could sit here every single year and look at a different group and pick apart everything they've done. It's an impossible job to achieve perfection, but there were clear priorities. And I think there are priorities that you would have been aligned with based on 10 years of arguing with you about this.
Correct. But I also felt like the 4 teams that were vying for that 12th spot, which was really Clemson before they, won the ACC title, I would not have made the case for them. I would have put Miami in that conversation, the Hurricanes. Excuse me, it wasn't Clemson. It was Miami from the ACC at 10-2. I thought they should have been given more consideration. And then the 3 9-3 SEC teams. The thing that's sort of the beauty of the system, I guess, I could have taken any one of them, made a very strong case for any single one of them, right? Like, and made a compelling case. It really did come down to a subjective, which team do you like the best? I really think that was the committee. Because I do think the committee got off the hook. And some of it was Ward Manuel backed himself into a corner because he gave out information that he didn't have to by setting his priorities of, we're not going to punish teams that play in the ACC championship game. Like, that's where I thought SMU, had they lost by 3 touchdowns, that would have made him look really bad, because what would you have said then about it? So like Clemson winning, SMU getting it to, respectable, where it's a last second field goal, was huge. I don't think the committee had to make a tough call about almost anything. You could argue the seeding, and I know that's been a hot point of contention, which I don't have that big of a problem with. But like, I thought that's what's going to happen every single year, is these teams are going to be flawed. It's which flaws do you like less, or which ones bother you more, I should say. Because I actually thought South Carolina was that team, because you remember when Sam Darnold and USC were 9-3 and they played Penn State in the bowl game, and I was like, this is why we need expansion. A team like this that was bad early makes a change. I think it was Max Brown maybe that started early for USC, got benched. They struggled early, and then they were hot at the end of the year. Like, that was one of the teams I was like, this is why we need expansion. So I actually liked South Carolina from the standpoint of which team would you kind of want to see in the playoffs. I would have been okay with that. The thing that was crazy about it is I thought Alabama had the worst resume, and yet the committee ranked them at the top of the 3 SEC teams, and Miami, which I think Miami got the calendar screwed Miami. You cannot lose 2 of your last 3 games and have any chance, which they didn't. But I thought their 2 losses were, quote, good losses against good teams that were, top 30 teams or whatever, top 25 teams, and they weren't ugly. I thought it was just the fact that they lost when they did was what screwed Miami.
Yeah, look, I think Georgia Tech with Haynes King is good. And that's a team, despite him not being there, that still won 7 games. I think if you watch QC throughout the year, like, Syracuse is a good football team. The problem is Miami's up 21-0 when everything matters, and that defense, let Syracuse back in. But again, Syracuse is pretty good. I think the problem is that it's the Cal game, it's the Virginia Tech game, it's the Louisville game. I think there were just a bunch of games there.
Here's what I have a problem with that, because people were like, oh, they had ugly wins. Isn't that better than losing to Vanderbilt? Or losing games, like actually losing those close games? Like, they did find a way to win, which bothered me when people were arguing about Miami's resume, saying, yeah, they had all these close wins. It was almost like they were dinged worse than if they would have lost the game. Like, it was an ugly win. They'd almost lost it. And yet they only lost twice, and these teams in the SEC lost 3 times. The other thing that really bothered me is we've drawn this arbitrary line at top 25 wins, where that's, again, where I think Miami got screwed. I don't think there's a big difference between 15 and 30 or 35 that you could almost interchange some of those teams. And a couple of those wins, Duke did not finish. They didn't get credit for beating Duke. They didn't. Syracuse got in late. Louisville was a team that would have been in like a top 30, top 35 toward a ranking, which I do think those are pretty good wins. Those are significant, and they don't get credit for them when Ward Manuel says, well, their record versus, they didn't have any top 25 wins. That I thought was a disservice to Miami, but they find these arbitrary lines that to explain away their decision. I get what they're doing, but I thought it was the incorrect way to go about doing it. Like, if you want to go wins over 500 teams, like, that to me makes way more sense. When teams with a winning record, like, if you want to go there, as opposed to drawing top 25.
I totally agree with you on the top 25 being this line in the sand, as if these teams 26 through 33 aren't just as good as like 17 through 25 and how interchangeable they are. And again, that changes every single year. So as I'm just doing this off the top of my head, you maybe even creep up a few spots even higher. All right, but let me ask you this, because I still think the Clemson LSU thing helps you kind of hammer down the priority of record. And I keep saying schedule experience, but I'm just trying to think of the best phrase to kind of cover what I thought was the different, because with all of this expansion, I knew that was going to happen this summer. It's like, man, it really feels like all these teams that are like, they're going through a completely different in-conference experience. So if SMU is the better team because they're 11-2, despite losing the head-to-head to Clemson, who then is 10-3. Clemson's losses are Georgia week 1, Louisville, they just lost to them, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then South Carolina, as they were driving for the game-tying field goal, interception ends up being the tip ball. All right, so like 2 of the 3 losses there are Georgia and South Carolina. SMU loses to BYU the beginning of the year before they make the change to Jennings, and then they lose that game to Clemson. And yet the committee keeping them ahead, like how can no one in the committee go, hey, man, like, do you think that's the same? Because it's not. Like, would you agree with what I'm saying here?
Absolutely.
Okay.
I agree with you.
So
I agree with you that Clemson should have been ranked higher than SMU.
Yes, right.
Okay.
So why then, if it's say Miami against an SEC team,
because they didn't have the head-to-head. You know what I mean?
Like that's only because they didn't have the head-to-head?
What's that?
Only because they didn't have the head-to-head?
No, I absolutely think that's what takes precedent every time when the resumes are similar. If they're very, very close, which is, I would say, 1 loss difference in an extra game.
To me, like, Clemson has the head-to-head, and it's like, oh, and they lost to Georgia and South Carolina. Like, they could have just not played those teams, but they're going to play them. And
right.
I think the Miami part of it, even though I think, you're right to push back on my close win thing, but I think trying to understand the committee is that it was like they were a bit like hanging on by a thread a little bit. And then they have the 2 late losses and they blow the huge lead to Syracuse. I don't know if enough people would give Georgia Tech credit, give Syracuse enough credit. It's like, hey, if you watch them, you'll like, that's a tough out. That's not in, I have like a stack of 10 to 12 teams every year that are not even in the top 25 that I'll just like, I'm sure it happens to you too, where you're just sort of like them. I think
I fell in love with A&M this year, and I was totally wrong on them the back end.
You did?
I did. I thought they were better than Texas. I thought they were going to beat Texas late with Marcel Reed. I thought he was a difference maker, and then he couldn't get it done when it mattered the most.
So what would have been what would have been the most outrageous scenario to you? Like, what if Indiana had been out and another SEC team had been in?
That would have been wrong. And that was the team that was starting to get like that. Reminded me of the Iowa team that we used to argue about. That was a half yard from getting to the Big Ten championship game, and coming up short. And Michigan State went on and won it. That was in the Big Ten championship game, right?
That was the Big Ten championship game,
where they came up short, and it was that was reminding me of that because I thought Indiana. Like of all the things that we talk about strength of schedule, and their schedule was easy, right? Not that it was easy. The non-conference was easy, and it timed up where the teams that they played, but they did dominate their schedule until they got to Ohio State and Michigan, who were 2 traditionally good teams. They beat one and they lost to the other. Like so, but the other parts of it, like when Missouri was boat racing god awful teams early this season, they were top 5 in the country. No one ever said, well, they haven't played anybody yet. Like, but they looked impressive because they were putting up massive points, and they were like, it was 89-3 or something was the point differential. Indiana was doing that all season long to lesser opponents, but like no one gave them any credit for it. It was like, oh, well, they're not playing anybody, but they were winning impressively, which if it's a traditional, blue blood, and I'm not even saying SEC, if that was Ohio State, because Ohio State didn't play anybody early either, non-con, but they were boat racing them. So it's like, oh yeah, we'll put them in the top 10. That's been like my biggest thing. And it's not even an SEC bias. It is a brand bias that exists where if you're a team that comes from obscurity or is not a traditional powerhouse, you have to win twice as much as the team that's already there, which it should be the opposite. Like you should have to prove more if you're that team that has more history, more tradition, more 5 stars, more resources, than opposed to a team like Indiana who's trying to defy the odds.
I totally understand where you're at in Indiana, and you gave me a hard time because the way the video was posted, and then you made it a little dramatic, I think, but where I was saying I inherently give teams the benefit of the doubt. Like I assume Texas is going to be good because they were in the playoff last year and they had the 3rd most returning players of any team in the SEC. They have their NFL prospect quarterback coming back. They added to the wide receivers. They're littered with draft picks. Their coach is still there, because then people were like, "Oh, you must like Washington too." It's like, actually, Washington, depending on which
Lost.
depth chart you believe, they had one or two guys returning from a playoff team. All of their NFL guys were gone, including the quarterback, the receivers, and the coach was gone. So yes, like, I shouldn't have to explain that. I think most sane people understand the difference. And so you're right. Maybe Indiana doesn't. Well, of course, Indiana's not getting the benefit of the doubt bump because they haven't ever been good, as opposed to Missouri that finishes really strong last year. They're on the radar. But like, it's the same thing with, like, why did you think the Bills would be good this summer?
Right.
Right? Why did you think the Niners would be good? Like, maybe you didn't, but I did. So I'm sorry that I do that in college football, and it doesn't feel fair to Indiana. But then I'll see, like, when you're doing the DK top 8 earned not given, and you have Indiana as the number 2 team in the country, that feels kind of given. That feels a bit like I'm doing this for
But they
a
hadn't
reason.
lost. They were undefeated. They hadn't lost.
They hadn't played.
And
I mean,
like,
at least you could argue Missouri, at least, like, look, people are going to laugh, but Boston College was top 25 when they beat him, and I don't think Boston College sucked this year.
So I'll give you two examples. So I'll give you one outside of the SEC. So I'm not picking on Texas now that they're in the SEC. Notre Dame. Like, Notre Dame's a good example of a team that just gets the complete pass because they're Notre Dame and they're a, traditional brand, and yet they haven't played anybody. And I think what's interesting about both of them is that Indiana did play both teams that were in the national championship last year. It's not their fault that Michigan sucked and Washington sucked and fell apart. Same thing with Notre Dame. Like, they didn't know Florida State was going to be awful. They didn't know USC was going to be 6-6. Like, they didn't know those things when they scheduled them. I mean, shoot, they had no idea Army.
But that's irrelevant. Like, I get your point. It's unlucky they didn't get a better. But
why don't Notre Dame and Texas get judged the same way that Indiana does?
Do you think Indiana's better than Notre Dame?
I think they could beat them, absolutely. You don't? So you're laying the points with Notre Dame.
No, I actually picked Indiana in the bracket just because I knew. Because I knew all year long with everything I've said, I was like, they'll end up winning their first playoff game. Maybe Indiana is really good, but they had one chance to prove it, and it was a disaster. And yet the committee was totally fine with it. And that's where I think it's not an Indiana SEC thing. It's, if, like, Indiana Clemson, it'd be a perfect example. If SMU ends up winning that game in overtime, right?
Yep.
Look, the fourth loss with Clemson, it wouldn't even be a question, but say that was Clemson's only loss, right? Well, then the committee wouldn't have dinged him because they clearly aren't doing anything with the conference championship games. It has nothing to do with Indiana. I just think everything that I'd said for years when we had heard it first was going to go to 12. I'm always going to have a problem with a team that I don't feel like has one good win after 12 games playing for a national championship. And I'm going to feel that way every year.
So then to flip it back on Notre Dame, why don't you have a problem that they had all these tests, and they had a test they completely failed against Northern Illinois, where if Indiana had run let's say they had beaten Ohio State, clearly that's like there's a signature win. But even if they had lost to, who's early on their schedule, Western Illinois or FIU. FIU was a bad team this year. Like, if they had lost that game, they're done. They're done for the season because they're Indiana. And I thought Notre Dame was going to be done after they lost that one. Like, that game still kind of bothers me because I think that should be a season, like, devastating type of loss where the regular season matters. Now, they dominated, they took care of their business, and they don't play in a conference, so they kind of get that pass sitting on the sidelines. But, like, Indiana doesn't survive that. If they lose to Northern Illinois, that is the main narrative around Indiana for the rest of the year. Like,
well, they had just won the week before on a Saturday night in College Station against number 20 Texas A&M, who I think, despite the disappointing close to the season and the non-ranking, I think it's okay to say that we think Texas A&M is a tough team to beat. So I understand what you're saying there with Indiana, and I could be even more unfair saying, well, they have wins against two other top 25s in Navy and Army, but I know what you're going to do if I say that. They've got a win against Louisville. The time of being ranked versus who ends up being ranked, is the more important part of the conversation. But there's at least a 4-0 thing that you can point to there with Notre Dame that you can't do with Indiana. I think my biggest issue with all of this stuff is we're getting further and further away from just, hey, I think this team is good and I think this team isn't as good. What's the point of watching?
Like, that was your point with Georgia and Oregon, like, just have them play. It was like, I think these are the two best teams. Was that the point you were trying to make with that?
Well, that one also got clipped out a little bit, where essentially I went with McShay and was just like, let's go through all the old systems. Like, if it was the BCS, it would be this. How would you feel? If it were the 4, how would you feel if it were if it were 6 with the first two? I know you were a big, let's have it be 6, 1 and 2 get buys, all 5 conferences, Power Fives represented when we still had the Pac-12, and then an automatic bid to the Group of 5 team. That was you, egalitarian. But people, based on your politics, are surprised that you were that fair and wanted that many people to be represented, so many voices to be heard from. So that was, and McShay had basically given up on the segment and hated me for even going through the whole point. But my clip that made it out was if I only wanted that. I thought for this year, with everything that happened around it, if it ended up just being Georgia and Oregon, that to me would have been a better representation of like who fought their way through the season. Because look, I don't care about the Georgia 2 losses when I think about the teams they played this year. Like, what's Indiana's record with Georgia's schedule?
And shout out, was it Cerruti that clipped that? Because that's a genius clip. Like, that thing goes viral, gets lots of views. It was awesome. But like that would have bothered me from the standpoint, and that was who the BCS would have liked to be, because I know the BCS system people put out those would have been the final 2 in the BCS, right?
Yeah. By the way, for this year was my point, that it probably, like, I would have gone, all right, I wouldn't have had if it was still the BCS system doing the show, whatever. I would have come in that Monday being like, I'm actually okay with it because I don't think this third team's left out. It does not mean there's a million other years where you're like, this is ridiculous, and I can't believe we only have these 2 teams. The clip did not work that way, but whatever.
But I actually agree with you. Like, if that was the BCS, I don't think there's outrage from anybody. You know, like I don't think Notre Dame is outraged because, again, we just talked about their schedule. Penn State could have, beaten Oregon to have the chance. Like,
they would have just lost.
I agree with your point.
Yeah.
Like, I don't think there would have been outrage. I love that we have 12 this year because I think it's a great year for it. Like, last time we talked, it was something like, I think there's more parity. And I do think we're going to see upsets, which is probably, and I picked 2 out of the 4, which will probably be the wrong 2, and then it'll be the wrong bracket. Then you're screwed.
Well, let's go through it then.
Yeah. What's that?
Let's go through it then, because I feel like I've spent a lot of time on recapping stuff the audience has already heard from both of us a ton. So let's go through your bracket right now. What do you have?
So I've got the one upset. Again, all these upsets, I have no idea. Like, I've been horrible picking games. And I think for whatever reason, it's just been bad. But I think all of them could be upset. So you're fine. The 2, I like Clemson in the first one. I think Clemson is it's like the quintessential Dabo Sweeney, us against the rest of y'all. Like, y'all get, like, no one believes in us. And I can picture him after the game again, like throwing it back in everybody's face. I think Cade Klubnik can get it done in a place where he won the state championship against Quinn Ewers. But this is probably more about Quinn Ewers. Something's wrong with him. Something's off. Like, I don't know if it's still the oblique. I don't know if it's the ankle. Maybe it's all of it. But if you look at his arm talent, this is a guy that was, touted as being one of the strongest arms in the country. The way he's like blooping the balls and like just putting a lot of air under him. When was the last time you saw him rifle a ball where it was like, oh, that's a ball that jumps off your arm? I haven't seen it this year. And it also goes to the depth of target, statistics that are out there. They are calling plays differently for him. So like, I think Clemson's defense, if they can keep him in check, which he's been struggling, I don't think it's that hard to do. I think this could be ripe for an upset. So I do like Clemson this one. I think there's a lot more pressure on Texas too. A team that, again, their 2 biggest games they lost against opponents that were equal to them or potentially better.
Yeah, look, I agree on the Ewers part of it. Not to say that he hasn't taken a few deep shots, like when they were trying to come back in the field goal, like he was getting the ball out, but it just doesn't seem like he's the same. And the numbers would back it up. Like, there's a very clear line in the sand of like when he comes back from the injury, it just hasn't been the same. But I think lost in all this kind of stuff with Texas losing to Georgia twice is that I feel like their defense is just completely overlooked. That defense is filthy.
It is.
What they did to A&M, I know the score is 17-7, but the only 7 are on the pick 6. They had the other, like, it probably should have been give them 2 field goals instead of 14 in the red zone because they had the 2 turnovers, but it's probably like a 21-0 game at their place, so that defense, I think, is pretty special. And even though Clemson's offense has clearly figured some things out after some years there where you're like, what is wrong with these guys? All right, that's cool. Tennessee,
I like
Ohio
the under
State
in that game, too, because of what you're talking about. I think Clemson's defense will have some success. Cade Klubnik's legs, I think, could play a part. And Bryant Wesco,
they should.
He's just coming off a huge game. If that could be a confidence booster, he's kind of a difference maker on the outside. But he's been very erratic and injured some of the year, too.
No, he's a stud. I mean, it's always weird when there's certain programs you're like, where's the Clemson receiver? Where's the
Yeah,
difference maker? I mean, that whole run was just littered with dudes
yeah.
that were better than everybody's defensive backs. I think the Tennessee line is huge here, and I can't figure. Like, there's a very classic like Ohio State, just when you're doubting them, but I feel like this is kind of 2 years of they're not really this physical dominating present. I know they've had the O-line issues, but Tennessee has some dudes on the front where I would expect this to be a competitive game. It's 7.5. I just don't see an Ohio State blowout against Tennessee.
So I think if you're Jim Knowles, you are selling out to stop Dylan Sampson, who's been one of the best backs in the SEC. And you're saying, good luck, Nico. You're on the road, you're in the cold, and you've been around, you've been up and down this year. You're young. Like I put it all on him. I think you bring pressure, and maybe it's pressure to stop the run, but you put your secondary on some islands and take the risk and say, go ahead and do it. So, and I think that's what they will, and I'll think they'll have some success doing it. Like it wasn't like, I don't know, the Michigan game to me, I'm not that bothered by. I absolutely hated the way that Ryan Day approached that game, like putting more pressure on everybody. Like, this is like the death of my dad if we lose. Like, you could sense a pressure and a stress around Ryan Day at media days this summer in Indianapolis because of that game. Just like had so much buildup. I thought they played tight. Now, how do you fix that? I think one, it's not Michigan, so that helps. Two, everyone's doubting you now. So you tell them that in the locker room. It's not you're supposed to win this game. We have to win it. Even though they're favorites, you're telling your players, everybody thinks you're done. Everybody thinks you're no good. So you're trying to play some of those mind games with them. But again, I think this comes down to, I hope they don't try to prove their physicality, because I think they did that somewhat against Michigan. Just be who you are. You're physical, but your offensive line has been banged up. Let Jeremiah Smith get off, like give him chances. Let Will Howard throw, work in the run game with your backfield, but you've got to call a game that at least opens it up somewhat and a little bit more aggressive. Because I thought they played a little bit tentative, and it's hard because Will Howard had a couple picks and he's been up and down, but they need to play aggressive and open up this offense, or else it will be a tight game. And if they're going and good luck trying to do it against Tennessee's front. Like, I think they're going to have to put it on Will Howard's shoulders, which if you get the version that you had against Oregon on the road, like then they could win and cover this thing and win by 10 points or more.
They win the whole thing. I mean, if
Yeah.
they were going to get that kind of, and I actually completely agree with you on just opening it up. Like, you've got all these receivers. I feel like in the Michigan game, you're like, I would be looking for Jeremiah Smith every single new set of downs. Like,
Yep.
just, I don't even care. 50-50 ball, just throw it up and let it get a chance. Like, instead, okay, cool, we're just running to the Michigan defensive line here again.
And if you go back, the game that comes to mind for me is Alabama, Tennessee, because Milroe missed a few guys that were wide open. I think you can get them. I think you can get Tennessee's secondary. And I also think that's the game where I'm like, good luck, Nico, because he missed some open guys too. He had the great touchdown pass to win the game, but there were a lot of plays left on the field by both those quarterbacks. That's why I think you got to challenge them. I think you got to put it on some of your playmakers on the outside.
This is the best, and McShay and I have talked about this, even after the Oregon loss, is the best I felt about Penn State in years.
What do you think about Pribula leaving?
Well, I think it sucks, but look, here's a very good example. So you see Bo Pribula, the backup, who they use in all these different ways, and he's just fun. You can tell, like, this guy, who knows what he's going to be like if he's dropping back and throwing 30 passes, but it was just a nice thing to have because he's a stud and he's a sick athlete. So when I saw the headline, I was really disappointed. I'm like, he's already transferring. And then I read even more about it, and I feel like he was like an impossible spot because of the way the portal thing is aligned. That he's like, you could wait, you could have some agreement in theory, but we just know how things go, man. And would a college that he wants to go to keep his seat warm with it all sort of agreed upon, and then he gets to stay at Penn State? So I think it has way more to do with the rules and the circumstances and the NIL and the agents and all the stuff flying around, that he was almost, by today's standards, forced to do something that it seemed pretty clear that he did not want to do. So I had a problem with it when I read the headline. I had far less of a problem with it once I researched it more.
clearly it's the system's fault, right? The calendar is so out of whack. It makes no sense. The fact that you have signing day the week of the championship games, the fact that the portal opens December, it makes zero sense whatsoever. I still wish he would have stayed. Like, I still think you find a way to work it out. You've got agents that are, it's like any free agency where you see guys sign at 12:01. Like, you could have the deal going. Devin Brown's in the portal for Ohio State. He's finishing. Like, he's like, I'm going to finish. I thought Dillingham at Arizona State handled this the best. Because the other thing I don't know, James Franklin might have been like, oh, you want to leave? Go. I don't want you. Like, some coaches might have that. I have no idea if that's Franklin's mindset, but he might have, got wind of this and said, see you later. So I hated it from the perspective. I hate the love letters. I just can't take them anymore. Like when, you profess your love for your teammates and then you're gone. I don't love the optics of that. Just hit the portal, like go get yours, go get paid. But I don't know. That was the thing that bothered me more. But it's very clearly it's the portal is the problem, the calendar of it. But what's crazy is they've been using him. Like, and I think that means maybe you see even more Tyler Warren, because they would have a package for Pribula to come in and run, be a little bit quarterback run game in the red zone, which I think Tyler Warren will take some of those reps. But we did see Drew Aller get hurt against Wisconsin. And last year we saw Malik Murphy exit before Texas played in the playoffs, and it was fine. Quinn Ewers was healthy. That's to me what becomes really problematic is if something happens to Aller, you're in big trouble if that happens. And that's where I wonder if he would regret.
Like, I don't feel like I ever saw enough from him to even know what he would be like dropping back for 30 games. But
right.
It's an awesome wrinkle.
Are you and McShay sold on Aller?
I like him more than Carson Beck. I like him more than this version of Ewers. I like him. Yeah, I do. Last year, the no interception thing was, to me, a huge problem. Because it just meant he was like scared to death. And I don't really love their outside. This is 2 years. I mean, other than Tyler Warren, the receiver situation at Penn State's been pretty disappointing. Look, I don't think this first round draft class is going to be really weird because it's going to be the two guys and then there's going to be a gap. And then, I see Milroe going in first round mocks, which I can't believe. I see Beck in some of them still. Wigman had one of the top grades going in as a draft prospect, and now he's out of there too. So I know Aller said he's coming back and people were kind of making fun of him. Like, oh, you're coming back. Like no one even cared. I like him. I'm not in love with him, but I like him better than a lot of the other options. And now he's not even an option.
Right. I felt like the USC game was his breakout game. And then it's sort of like you didn't see that again until the Oregon game. There were a couple big plays he had to make, and it was I know they were trying to come back, so it put more on his shoulders.
The fourth down play for him,
I
don't think Penn State's making that fourth down.
No,
they're not going to get. And so, I know everybody wants perfect all the time with some of these guys, but between the SC game, I think even the Minnesota game, and then certainly the Oregon game. Like, again, I wouldn't have my head of the other two guys, certainly, but I like him. Like, to me, he's not a concern anymore. Like, to me, he's a massive, maybe not massive, but he's just an advantage. Like, you've got a guy back there who's played a ton, who's been through a lot. Because I thought he was shot last year, just shot. Yeah. So, SMU, any chance in a non-Kanell way?
No. This is the game I probably have the biggest fear of. Like, I don't. This is probably the least likely one I would say is an upset. SMU on the road in the cold. Can they the physicality? And they've done a fantastic job, like getting up to speed in the ACC. Like they did recruit for, and they hit the portal to try to boost up their offensive and defensive line. And they did a pretty good job against Clemson, shutting down their run game. But I think trying to shut down Singleton and Allen's going to be a completely different ball game. Like, and you were talking about, Penn State, the physicality of Penn State, I think, could be a problem. Now, Rhett Lashley is a great offensive mind. I worry about sort of a quarterback like Jennings who likes to get out of the pocket a little bit if it is cold weather. Like, I don't see this one as one of the ones I would circle for an upset.
Jennings is going to wear you out. Like, he's going to wear out your defensive line, even if you're more talented than the opponent, because you're constantly dealing with this guy keeping plays alive in ways that it's just, every time I've watched SMU, I go, how did he end up there?
Right.
Like that's the launch point. Like, how did he end up in this play over there? But look, Penn State pushed Oregon's D-line all night long. It just, the
Yep.
problem is that Oregon was going to get the football back. But I like Penn State. I like them in this tournament, if you would let me say that. All right, final one here: Indiana, Notre Dame, and then we get your pick for the overall thing, and I'll show you mine as well. I know that I was really hoping for the Indiana SEC matchup just because I wanted it. I wanted to see it, and then it feels a bit like, oh well, they get Notre Dame, and I think all of us are a little. I don't know if we're all guilty of it, so I don't want to speak for everybody, but just because of like the way you think of the cliche Notre Dame thing, it's like, oh, well, Indiana doesn't have to face like all these crazy SEC athletes and they get Notre Dame. But it's like, okay, but if you watch Notre Dame's offensive line this year against Indiana's D line that has like the one guy that's graded as a second rounder. So this may be, all of us are just kind of falling into this Midwest bunch of Midwest dudes, like perfect matchup for Indiana. And it might actually be a bad matchup for him because of that O-line for Notre Dame.
It could be. I think Notre Dame is too one-dimensional. I don't love Riley Leonard as a passer.
What happened to him? Because you loved him at Duke. Is that guy gone?
No, so I love him as a young, like he's a great kid. He's a great athlete. I thought he would continue to progress as a passer. Like I thought it might have been in him, and then you give him better weapons, and like you give him some opportunity. I just don't. I think he's got his limitations. So Dusty on the radio called the game against Clemson where he upset, where Duke beat Clemson when Riley Leonard was there. And I remember him saying, and I asked him about it during the game, even Duke's coaches were like, hey, he needs to really work on his passing game. Like the arm strength is a little limited. He's got to take that next step forward. And this year he's been okay, but I think they're too one-dimensional. Like if you can take away their run game, which is a big if, but I do think Indiana's defense is better than we think. Like they did a pretty good job against Ohio State. Like they didn't lose that game because Ohio State was just running up
I
and down
saw
the
your
field.
tweet on that. You also
the tweet was definitely misleading, but it's not like they got pushed around on the field, right? I was definitely leaning into my narrative, and I had some stats to back it up.
You did it. Well, they were flawed because as soon as you posted it, I'm like, why is he doing this? He played like you were looking at total yardage, which conveniently leaves out the punt return and the fact that Ohio State was basically down 3 possessions because of the turnover short field and the return on special teams. So like when you do that, I'm like, I can't believe he's doing this.
But they did a pretty good job against, like they didn't get run all over. I think people thought they were going to get, Travion Henderson, Quinshon, they're just going to bowl them. They're just going to run through them. I don't think they did that.
I thought Ohio State was like, these guys have no chance. None whatsoever. There was one drive Ohio State had.
So that's what concerns me. So I thought they had no chance from Curtis Rourke. Like that offense looked completely shut down. I thought their defense actually played okay. Their offense I thought was embarrassing. Like that was what I thought was, oh boy, they can hang with these big boys. That's the biggest challenge I think in this game for Indiana is can they score points? I think they'll have success, like control, not giving up a boatload of points to Riley Leonard and company. And Jeremiah Love's banged up. That to me is a pretty significant potential, injury that Notre Dame's dealing with.
Yeah, but wait,
so you sound like you like Notre Dame, but you're picking Indiana.
I'm putting on my bracket. The bracket's just a work of art. But look, like Jadarian comes in for Love, and he has 100 yards behind that O-line against SC. But the problem, I think you're right. Well, you're not. I don't think you are right about the one-dimensional part of it. Maybe they were just smoking all of these teams. It didn't matter. They're going to grind everybody out. But their top 2 receivers combined for 60 catches. 2 guys.
Right.
60 catches this season.
Right. And like that to me is, but in Indiana, they have to take away the run and make Riley Leonard beat you. And what else is going to be interesting is the weather in this game, because that's where I don't picture Indiana lining it up and running. So Curtis Rourke has to have a good game, because I think Surratt's a really good receiver. He had a couple drops against Michigan. But Curtis Rourke was running for his life against Ohio State. Like they have to do a better job protecting him, which he might. But they had schemed up some things early. Like they've got to continue that, offensive success. And I think it has to come through the air, which makes the conditions pretty interesting. If it's cold and snowy, which this one is the coldest and snowiest of all the forecasts, I believe. Like, I don't think that favors, like if it's ugly at game time and it's cold, windy, and snowy, I am hating my pick of Indiana upsetting Notre Dame.
Yeah, because that'll be another thing. It's like, you could talk to people like, oh, this is perfect for Indiana. Like they're like, this is exactly what Notre Dame's going to want.
Right.
Like, cool, we're just going to line it up, try to run it at you the entire time. All right, what was your final two then? And who do you have winning the whole thing?
I guess call me a prisoner of the BCS. I have Oregon, Georgia in the final, which I'm kind of bothered by because when I made this, so I've stuck with the same bracket, have not wavered since like 15 minutes after the bracket. They put you on, on TV and say, hey, who are you going with? And I was like, all right, I'm rolling with these. And did not know what was going on with Carson Beck. And I guess to some extent we don't still, but I just think their defense is good. I think the path is pretty good. So I have Indiana advancing through Notre Dame. And even if it's Notre Dame, I still would like Georgia in them match up with or without Carson Beck, and maybe even a little bit better with Gunnar Stockton back there. And then against Penn State, I don't trust Penn State to be able to do much against Georgia's defense. That would have to be a Drew Aller come of age type of moment. And maybe he has it.
Declares for the draft.
That one.
I changed my mind. I'm out of here. I have Oregon over Penn State.
Love it.
The bracket, I was just trying to feel it and go through it. But I could also see myself after first rounds of games, kind of changing my mind about, but whatever. I had to put in my bracket. I had to do it. Okay. A couple things I wanted to close with here. I know that your camp was really excited about the Cal Auburn result, the USC result against LSU.
Great opening weekend. Yeah.
Right. It's a great opening weekend. Do you know the final records of the Power Four against each other? Do you know those?
I've seen them posted. I've seen them out there. I don't have them memorized like you do.
So the SEC, Big 10, Big 12, ACC against the other three.
Yeah.
ACC 10 and 12. But give it to them. They schedule them up.
That's right.
22 games.
That's actually not that bad. I would take that all day long.
10 and 12 is not bad. Hey, there were years I was arguing, hey, look at the ACC draft pick totals. How come they're not? It was frustrating. What's up with this ACC? Look at all of these draft picks because there was a bunch of years ago where they were
and there were a lot of them in the first three rounds, which are more important.
Yeah,
they were better players. Yeah.
The Big 12 5-9, the Big 10 7-9, lesser games scheduled, but as you could see, any Big Ten fan that never defended the Pac-10 when they played the ninth conference game that somehow is thrilled to get an extra game against the bottom of the Big Ten, as if that's some massive statement of competition. 7-9. The SEC went 13-6. So
one of those is against Wake Forest when Ole Miss demolished them, which
do you want to do
Forest
that?
Did cancel.
Do you want to go through the ones that aren't that good?
So what do you want? What do you want? Congrats?
No,
want a cookie?
I just remember earlier in the year, the Cal Auburn one was a big, this conference might not be that good. I also saw, no, I'm not done yet.
Okay.
I also saw another tweet after the Heisman where you had said,
that was a good
we
one.
looked through all the finalists that
10 guys
did not have any SEC names, right? And you said in a very coy way, notice anything missing?
I mean, I thought the best conference, you just called them I thought they'd have the best players. They'd have some playmakers.
So is your position that Heisman winners, Heisman finalists reflect conference strength? And if you don't have those, perhaps conference weakness? Is that what you're saying?
That could be a pretty good hypothetical. I like that scenario. You've never heard me say the SEC is not the strongest. I've just said we have to stop.
You do a bad job of saying it.
How much better they are. The dumbest thing I think the ACC and Big 12 did was passing on the deal that would have been 3-3, automatics, 3 from the SEC, 3 from the Big 10, 2 from the Big 12, 2 from the ACC, 1 automatic qualifier and 1 at large and 1 group of 5. And then that is guaranteed. If you're going to get screwed, which they are because they don't have the money, they don't have the resources, just tell me how bad you're going to screw me. And they said no, which is why they almost got one team in this year. I thought it was a horrible decision to pass on that deal. And they had it on the table and said no.
I think our longstanding issue is that for a decade plus of doing this, you say it's the best and then you shit on it for 4 months.
That's to make sure that we don't have 6 teams in a 12-team playoff. That's why.
Do you think you're important enough? Like, when you send a tweet that's just pure propaganda,
right,
that you think like maybe one mind can be changed today?
Absolutely. Definitely. And if it gets to Ward Manuel, all I need is somebody to just tag Ward Manuel on it, or any of the other committee members, just to bring their attention to it. So I feel like that is my goal in life.
I think it is. I think that's psychotic to think that you have that much influence. That when you send the tweet, I'm like, I think he thinks maybe there's one person in the committee. He's like, yeah, because your target is impossible to hit. It's the best, but then you're vague about what the gap is. So I imagine on your tombstone, you'd want it to say they weren't that much better.
Yes, that's exactly what I would put. That would be it. By the way, I think we can agree on this. And we cannot agree on one thing. If I was in that committee room, we would need to televise it, because that would be entertainment, and you would watch. You and I both should be in that room making the cases, because then that would be must-see television. And you could take the pro SEC stance. I'll take the pro everybody else.
I would take the pro truth stance. I would argue
so that's
about
all of you. All I use is facts.
I would argue about what I saw previous Saturdays.
Was there somebody on there that was in the SEC? Did I lie about that stat?
You fight earned bias with delusional bias. That's where I think there was a disconnect. And it almost got personal. We didn't even know if we were going to have you on again, but I'm glad that we did, buddy.
I absolutely hate that Boise State is sitting there with a 3 seed and a bye.
So do
That's the dumbest thing we've ever done. Like, it's
now we're talking.
Yes. And hey, I have been Group of 5 Danny, right? 2017 UCF national champs. Let's go. But to give them a 3 seed is an absolute joke. Like, that will get it changed, though, because it doesn't make any sense whatsoever. But that I don't even know if people got that upset about it. Like, it's ridiculous that they're getting that much of an advantage.
We spent so much time on the SEC and Indiana, and then the ACC thing of them. The bracket came out. You had guys going, "Excuse me, like, what's going to happen?" When it was automatic bids for those scenarios, I didn't like it either, and I don't like it for anybody. It's simply, we will have a year where some team has 4 losses that wins their conference. I mean, not likely, but you're going to have a really bad conference winner, or in this case, the Group of 5. Where can we hear you and Dusty so the listeners know?
Sirius XM, 6 a.m. to 9 a.m. Cover 3 Pod 2, CBS Sports. And now, for the first time on TikTok, at D Kanell. Watch out for some fire takes and some pretty cool dances.
Dance videos and college football. What else could a gal want? Thanks, Danny.
You got it.